In today's video, I want to talk a little bit about an alternative to IIA chapter meetings. Now, if you're not familiar with kind of how that works, the Institute of Internal Auditors often has local chapters that are run by volunteer members that usually put on some sort of monthly or at least quarterly networking and training so people can get CPE. And I've been talking to a lot of different volunteer leaders at the chapter level and have been looking at kind of how things have changed. And so I think I want to talk about an alternative. Now, I know some of you listening might be very staunch IIA members. You belong to a very active local chapter and you really enjoy going to the meetings. That's wonderful. Kind of from my background, I used to be the president of a local IIA chapter. I was also the district representative, so I helped the local volunteer leaders throughout the year in a certain geographic area in the U.S. And I've been involved in a lot of different IIA committees over the years as a volunteer leader. So I have a lot of experience in that. So again, if you're like, Jason's just bad mouthing us, no, I've been there. I've done that too. But like I said, there's a few things that have really kind of come up that's made me think, maybe how relevant are IIA chapters? Are they actually serving the internal audit profession? And are they really kind of worth it? And what I'm meaning here is, again, not to discount the volunteers and the good work that they're doing, but it is a volunteer position. It requires a lot of hours of people putting in their time volunteering, and a lot of people just aren't using the services. And there's several different reasons for that I want to talk about to see if you're in this situation. So one of the issues, and again, I'll give you some numbers here, is the last IIA chapter that I was a part of was the Orange County, California. So it's in the suburb area in the Los Angeles area, made up of Orange County. So there's about 3 million people that live in Orange County. And in the local chapter, we had about 700 members, 700 members in that local chapter. Now, we were lucky to get 30 to 50 people to come to meetings. And so even back at that time, it kind of made me question, if 700 people are members, but only 30 to 50 are coming to the meetings, why are the other people not coming? And, one obvious conclusion is that they're probably not getting value, or else they would find the time to show up. Right. And so, like I said, those were the numbers from the Orange County chapter. When I was president of Boise, I want to say we had 50 to 75 members. Same thing. We'd get 20 to 25 people to come to our meetings. So obviously a lot less than half of the people actually go to the meetings. And so that brings up the question, well, why, right? Why are people not going to the meetings? And, over the years, and I've seen this for myself as well, I think there's several different reasons why people are not going to the meetings. And so I'll just talk about them and then talk about some alternatives now that are available if going to an IIA chapter meeting is not something that works for you. So I think one of the first reasons is that the chapter usually does in-person events, which means that you have to travel to go to it. Now, even if it's in your city, sometimes it still requires some time, effort to get there. So again, when I was in California, the Orange County chapter was, 20 or 30 miles away from where I worked, but it would take me sometimes an hour to 2 hours each way because of traffic to go to a meeting. And so really on the days when there was a chapter meeting, like a lunch meeting, if I wanted to go, I would spend 4 to 5 hours out of my day going to get 1 hour of CPE. And, there were just some days that I just didn't want to be on the road. The topic wasn't as relevant for me, and I just couldn't justify, because I was busy at work, actually going and spending that amount of time to travel, even when it was in the same metro area. Okay. Now, right now, I live in northern Arizona, and so the closest chapter to me is Phoenix, which is, again, 2 to 2.5 hours away. So for me to go down to a chapter meeting in Phoenix, I would spend 5 hours driving for 1 hour of CPE. And so again, for me, hard to justify spending that much time away from my job or that much time away from my family to go for 1 hour of CPE. So the geographic difference is, I think, one reason why people don't go. And again, I'm talking, mainly here in the US, but again, there's chapters or institutes that are located around the world as well, but they may not be close to you either, right? And so you may be thinking, well, it'd be wonderful to go, but, I can't justify the time or the expense to go. Another reason, often, again, because the chapters are run by volunteers and have a very small budget, it means that they usually don't get the best or the most entertaining, and maybe not even the most technically competent people to speak at the chapter meetings. Now, again, I'm not judging anybody, because I sometimes will speak at IIA chapters virtually, and I have in person in the past, but now I do it virtually sometimes, because I like to help give as well, right? But the fact is, they usually have a very small budget or no budget, which means the people who are speaking at the events are people who are not being paid. Now, for people that do teaching, training, speaking professionally, it's hard to do something for free. And so a lot of times the people who are left to speak are sometimes, people who are maybe a chief audit executive or a leader in an audit department, and they're explaining what they're doing, which often are very good discussions. Sometimes they're kind of boring. It depends on the person. Or they end up relying a lot of times on the firms who use it kind of as a practice development. They'll send a manager or somebody to go give a presentation for free, because again, they're using it then as a networking opportunity and an opportunity for them to get new business. Now, you would think that's fine, but there's one example that I remember, and again, this was in the Orange County chapter, that I went to one of the meetings. It was shortly after the new COSO ERM model came out. And in that, there was a senior manager and a manager from an international accounting firm. So it was not one of the big four, but it was one of the big names that everybody knows, that's international accounting firm. So again, senior manager and a manager. And they were giving a presentation about the new COSO ERM framework. And that framework had quite a few changes from the previous one. And these two managers were given a firm slide deck. Here you go. Here's the firm, approved slide deck, and just go through and talk about it. So it was pretty apparent that both of these individuals didn't have much knowledge of the actual COSO framework. And so they were just pretty much reading off the slides. And I remember they got to one slide that talked about the different ways to respond to risk. And in that COSO model, there were 8. Get my fingers right. There we go. 8 different ways that you can respond to risk. And one of them is increase the risk. And so I remember watching both of these managers just kind of all of a sudden the slide comes up, they start reading the slide, and they both look at each other and they're like, oh, something must be wrong there. And so I had to, kind of sheepishly, or not so sheepishly, if you know me, raise my hand and say, have you guys not read it? That's one of the risk response activities, and this is what they mean by it. But again, you would assume that a senior manager and a manager from an international accounting firm would be competent to be able to share some of that information, but it was obvious that they didn't. Now, again, nothing against those gentlemen, nothing against their firm, but often, as I've gone to IIA chapter meetings over the years, a lot of times that's been kind of my experience. Is I get there and I'm kind of disappointed, either that the people don't really understand what they're talking about, they're just reading off the slides. If you ask questions, they really don't have answers for it. And so for me, a lot of times, the topics or the speakers just didn't interest me. And so even if it was only 10 minutes down the road, I still didn't end up going, right? I mean, literally one of them, our meetings were like right across the street from my office, and some of them I didn't go to because the topic and the presenter didn't interest me. So that's another reason, right? And again, limited in the number of offerings throughout the year. If they're monthly, then you have 12 opportunities or 12 different topics maybe that you can go to and earn 12 to 20 hours worth of CPE for the year. Again, if you choose to, if you want to do that. And so again, that's another reason why a lot of people don't go, is the topics are not really relevant to them. Now, I know, especially for chief audit executives, some of the chapters will do a CAE roundtable because they want to get CAEs to come. But most chief audit executives don't go to those chapter roundtables. They usually send somebody on their staff. And so those discussions usually were not very relevant for me when I was a chief audit executive, so I didn't go. And that's one of the reasons why I started the Audit Leader Forum, is a different kind of option where people in the group actually drive the agenda and also can have those high-level conversations because you're in the room with other chief audit executives, okay? So those are a couple of reasons why, people maybe don't go to the chapter meetings. Now, another thing that I've heard a lot from volunteers lately is, usually the chapters do a good job as long as the volunteer leaders have the time and the energy to actually put into it. And so what ends up happening is a lot of times, for a year or two, when you get some volunteer people on the board that are very good, that are very motivated, they really want to do it, they end up having some good sessions, and then those people get burned out, right? Because again, they're not getting paid for it. It's a volunteer thing. And because of that, they can only take so much time away from their job or from their family. And because of that, often the quality of the offerings end up going down. Now, another thing that happened too is, when we had the pandemic, obviously we couldn't meet in person. And so a lot of the chapters quit meeting physically and went to a virtual model for a while. And some of them liked the virtual model. It was good. They were able to have people that even from other parts in the world, come to their chapter meeting. But what I've heard from a lot of the volunteers now is that IIA headquarters is kind of forcing them to go back to in-person only, and will only allow them to do certain events certain times of the year, because headquarters sees the chapters as competing with their training revenue model business. So that's another thing to kind of throw in here, that's just kind of making it harder for the local chapters and those good people who are the volunteers to be able to provide high quality training. Okay. So again, those have been kind of some of my experiences. And they're experiences that are similar to other people that I talk to as well. And so again, if you're sitting here listening to this going, yep, I can relate to that. Yep, yep, yep. I don't really go to the chapter meetings anymore either. Then, you're kind of left on your own to find your own training to get your CPE for the year. And so again, a lot of times people will do some of the free webinars that are out there through the firms. Now, again, I've sat through a lot of those. Some of them are really good, and some of them are kind of like that experience that I had with those two managers from the international firm who were just reading slides and didn't really have a deep understanding of the knowledge. Or the firms put out things that they want you to be interested in or think that you need more help on so that they can sell you a consulting project. There's business development behind this whole thing. So those are some of the options that are out there. Now, here's some other options, right? cRisk Academy has been around since 2016. That has over 500 audit courses that are on demand, which means, that issue that I talked about at the beginning where, I'd have to spend 5 hours in the car going to Phoenix. I don't have to do that, right? I can just log on to the website. I can register for a course and I can take it right then. So I'm only into it an hour is all I have to invest of my time to get an hour of CPE, right? So for me, that's a great option. And here, let me put the banner up here so you can see if you're interested in that. You can go to ondemand.criskacademy.com. Okay. So that's an option. Now, another thing that I have started doing is creating audit discussions. So some of these live videos that I do, if you miss a live video, you can go back and watch them as an audit discussion. I'm also having more discussions with other audit leaders and people in the internal audit space where we have conversations. And a lot of times those conversations are not in the mainstream, right? So IIA headquarters has a certain agenda. They only want to talk about certain things in a certain way. The firms have a certain agenda. They only want to talk about certain things in a certain way that benefit them, right? These audit discussions are just discussions that I have with other people. There's no agenda behind it. We're not trying to sell product or do anything like that. But I'm also trying to help make sure that some of these alternative voices are actually heard, right? People who maybe may disagree with what the IIA says. We need a forum for people to be able to express those opinions and allow others, right, to be able to hear that and decide whether they agree or disagree. And again, you can choose to agree or disagree, but the topics are usually more that are top of mind for people who are audit leaders or people that are actually practicing internal audit, talking about practical things of what people are actually doing and trying to figure out how you can do internal audit the best at your organization. So again, I'm going to wrap up kind of for today, but again, I just wanted to put out there and show there are alternatives to IIA chapters. I'm not saying get rid of chapters completely, but the data is overwhelming that people are not using the chapters. And so they must not be finding some value. Something must not be convenient for them. So again, I guess another reason why some people don't go is they're at a specific date and time, right? And maybe if you have meetings at work or other obligations, you just can't show up live to that particular time. Well, courses on cRisk Academy or these audit discussions I talked about are on demand. You can take them 24/7. If you want to take it at 3 o'clock in the morning, because that's when you work best, then you do it at 3 o'clock in the morning, right? Because really it's up to you and you don't have all the travel time and everything else associated with it. So again, hopefully you find that helpful. And, if you have questions, leave anything in the comments for me. And we will see you on the next video. Have a great day and a great rest of your week.